Afternoon. Hello, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Start off maybe by saying the name and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Lisa King.
Mm.
I'm the founder and CEO of AF Drinks.
Mm-hmm.
We're a premium non-alcoholic cocktail drinks company that started in New Zealand at the end of 2020. And since then we've launched into the US about 3 years ago, and then we just launched in the UK about 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a exciting and fun but very fast-paced journey.
Good journey so far. And so New Zealand, so we're here in London. When did you get in?
Oh, like 2 nights ago.
Oh.
I'm still a bit jet-lagged.
Mm-hmm. But enjoying it so far?
Yeah. I actually lived in London about 20 years ago, as most Kiwis do, for about 2 years. And that was kind of like the early part of my career. I'd spent like 15 years working for multinationals, and I worked for Unilever here for 2 years. Okay. Yeah, so it's actually really nice being back. Yeah. Okay,
so let's go back to 2020, where it all began. So tell us about the origins of AF.
I had been actually suffering from quite severe vertigo, and I realized that every time I had vertigo, I'd also had a gin and tonic. And so I thought, okay, I better stop drinking for a while, see if I could get this vertigo under control, because if anyone's ever had really bad vertigo, like it's the worst thing ever. And it was just before we were going into lockdown in New Zealand, and I just couldn't find anything good to drink, and you'd go out and first of all people would be like, why aren't you drinking? Is there something wrong with you? Yeah. And then the only kind of options were like sugary soft drinks or juice. And in New Zealand at the time, we just had zero beers, and I think Seedlip was the only kind of non-alc spirit alternative. And I just wanted a really good gin and tonic, but without the alcohol. And so given my background, I just thought, well, why not make it myself? And that's kind of how AF started. It was a lockdown project. I got together a bunch of incredibly smart, creative people, and we started, first 4 months was just Zoom calls, and I'd have the product development company drop samples off at my door at home, taste them, give them feedback, they drop off more samples. And then we launched in New Zealand at the end of 2020. There was nothing like it on the market. And so it was quite an education for everyone. Like consumers were like, well, why would you have a gin and tonic without alcohol? And retailers were like, where are we going to sell this? Is it going to be with alcohol? Do we sell it with soft drinks? So we're very much kind of leading and helping to create the category. And now we have 40% market share in our home country. Wow.
So gin and tonic was the first one? Okay, so talk us through, you're in lockdown, so you're isolated from the other people that you're working with. So what was that like, that sort of process?
Yeah, I think we were all getting used to just, Zoom meetings and things like that at the time. Fortunately, from my past kind of career, I had worked with a lot of these people before. And they're just, incredibly smart. When you're starting a new business, it's very hard to get that kind of level of expertise and experience. And so we, as the founding team, we all worked for kind of equity in the business. And it was actually a really fun process, to be able to start a brand right from scratch and determine how you want it to be, and seeing the designs and all the iterations come to life. That creative process is just so much fun. And then with actually making the drinks themselves, that was a bit harder because you can't have, groups of people trying the drinks and giving you feedback on that. So I very much kind of had to rely on my own taste buds. And one thing with these drinks is that we we'd tried quite a lot of really bad non-alc drinks previously, and the last thing we wanted was for our drinks to taste just like a flavored sparkling water. And I think, with a really good cocktail, you always have that bite and that mouthfeel. And then, people drink not just for the taste, but the feeling of drinking. And we kind of wanted to recreate that. And so we found this special ingredient in New Zealand. We call it Afterglow.
Yeah.
And it's our little trademark secret ingredient. And it's 100% natural, legal, but it gives you a little burn at the back of your throat when you drink it. And it also mimics the warming sensation of alcohol. So for me, for example, like my cheeks will get warm after a couple of AFs, or, you get that warming feeling in your chest, like you've been drinking. And that really that's been our huge advantage and differentiator, because I think there's still a lot of products that are launching and people are going, well, what is this?
Yeah.
And, it's also how we justify like the premium pricing of our drinks, because they really do taste like there's alcohol in them.
Oh, okay. So you went to market first with the gin and tonic, or any other, just with the gin and tonic?
Yeah, just with the gin and tonics. That was, my drink. Yeah. That's what I wanted. But we quickly, from the process of developing those drinks, like we got a great process down, and we quickly developed other drinks, such as like Aperol spritz. That became a huge thing. And, we wanted to also bring in more males into our brand, and so we launched the spice rum and ginger thinking it would really appeal to males, but actually appeals equally to females as well. So we've developed probably about 15 different cocktails in that time. And when we went to the States, one thing they kept saying to us, oh, you've got like a tequila based cocktail, right? And we were like, no, we don't, because it wasn't popular in New Zealand. But we quickly developed like a Paloma, and then the margaritas. We have a chili and a mango marg in the US, a whiskey, ginger. So as we've kind of moved into a different market, we've adapted for local tastes as well.
Okay. So with the gin and tonic starting, you went to market. I think you alluded to it a little bit in terms of like, okay, where do we start? And people being a little bit unsure about what you were. So tell us about that. So that story.
Yeah, well, the way we position ourselves is like we want it to be just like an alcohol brand. It's fun, it's got personality, it tastes great. And most alcohol brands are built in bars and restaurants. That's where you kind of first taste them. But because of COVID, a lot of those bars and restaurants weren't open. And so we kind of had to go through the supermarket channel. There was just a lot of questions, because there'd never been these types of products before. So it was like, oh God, how much do we make? How much are we going to sell? Do we ask people for ID? These are non-alcoholic, but they're still very much targeted at adults. So there was just a lot of learning together with the retailers and working things out. And the biggest question, of course, is are consumers going to accept this, or is it just a little fad? And what I was starting to see happen in the UK was that there was this huge move towards that kind of sober curious movement, and I could see that was going to come to New Zealand. And so, definitely took a lot of convincing. And, we would do sampling and people would try it and they'd be like, oh, I love, this gin and tonic. And then we'd have some customers come back and go, hang on, is there no alcohol in this? And then they would put the product back, even though they really enjoyed the taste. So I think, coming particularly from New Zealand, Australia, UK, heavy drinking cultures. And so for us, we're like, how do we change that? But we don't want to tell people alcohol's bad for you. This isn't about preaching sobriety. And so we just wanted to try and make like not drinking really cool and fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, we've been able to do and make it more aspirational than something you should be hiding. Because I think, what we're trying to do ultimately is to give people choice and help people moderate in a way that doesn't feel like they're being excluded socially.
You're in bars as well and off licenses, and where you kind of stopped?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, supermarkets, bars, restaurants, venues, hotels, because literally everywhere we sell alcohol, that's where we want to be. And what we've learned about our customers over the years now is that most of them still drink.
Yeah.
Like 94% of people in the US who are buying these types of products are still buying alcohol. So it's not about like complete sobriety. It's actually about just moderation and reduction. In the same way, like I think, like Meatless Monday or movement took off. It was, when we hear that from customers, they're like, oh yeah, I don't drink Monday to Thursday. And then I just drink on the weekends.
Yeah.
Or, the zebra drinking kind of trend of like one alcoholic, one non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
So, I think we've seen in a very short amount of time that huge movement towards moderation and this becoming part of people's lifestyles. So, yeah, in New Zealand, we're in, pretty much anywhere you can find alcohol. And then we launched in the US 3 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
And we, again, surprised, like we got to the US, supermarkets weren't selling these types of products in the US. They were quite behind, like the UK and other markets. And so we had the opportunity to be one of the first brands to be sold. And we started off in 400 stores with a retailer called Sprouts. So kind of similar to a Whole Foods farmers market type of retailer. And then within a year, we were in Target, Walmart. We've just launched in Whole Foods and Kroger in the US. So we're in about 4,500 stores now in the US and starting to make, get into bars and restaurants. So, yeah, it's growing really, really fast.
And you've spoken on this a little bit, the fact that the brand is fun and not like kind of very serious, don't drink. You're like, it's okay to drink and it's okay to drink this is fun.
Yeah, I think, we absolutely know. And we talked about this a lot as a team, is like, with smoking, like the warnings on packets and things, it didn't really work.
Yeah.
And so we didn't want to scare people and we didn't want to be judgmental as well. And actually it's funny because everyone thinks like I don't drink at all.
Yeah.
But, I do sometimes, and when I feel like it, like I want to have a really nice red wine with my meal once in a while, or a glass of champagne for a celebration. I'd say 90% of the time I don't drink, and my body's so used to not having alcohol, it doesn't take very much now for me to. But we definitely wanted to make it something that was so cool that everyone just wanted to be a part of. And so, part of our business is actually sharing stories. And we had a podcast that we started in New Zealand called Drunk AF, where we actually interviewed people, well-known New Zealanders, about their relationship with alcohol and how that's changed. And again, like we find people, it's not just about I'm going 100% not drinking. There might be periods of time or that they just get to a point where they're like, actually, I want to be like 100% on all the time. And so they'll give up for a while. So I think, that was really important to us. And a lot of brands do talk about health and wellness. For us, we think it's more important to still have that social connection. And from my own experience, I know like I still wanted to go out. I still wanted to be with friends and socialize, but I didn't want to sit there nursing like a glass of water or soda. And I wanted to feel like I was still having this beautiful drink, served in a glass with ice and beautiful garnish, and still feel like I was the same as everyone else. And And I think especially now, you know, our recent campaign for our launch in the UK was called Get Drunk on Life. Instead of telling people to get dry for Dry January, we were telling people to get drunk on the things that didn't necessarily involve booze, but like on music, on dancing, on culture, of just getting out there and having real life social connections and experiences.
Okay, so New Zealand smash hit, doing really well in the States. Then you decide to come and visit us. So what made you, choose us next? And tell us about that journey. How's it been so far?
Yeah, look, 18 months ago, I mean, we were deep, neck deep in the US. It's such a massive market. And we obviously had these huge retailers and all of our focus was on that. And then we got a call from one of the big retailers here in the UK about 18 months ago. And, we'd seen like the category in the UK, it's very mature, every store has a no-low section. So we always thought, oh, we're too late. There must be, 10 other brands. And when we got the call from the retailer, we were quite surprised. I flew over from New Zealand and we had a meeting with them. And what they were finding was that younger consumer, they didn't want to spend £20 on this big bottle of, a non-alcoholic gin of a brand that their parents or their grandparents were drinking, and there was nothing really that was modern and kind of relevant to them, and also in a format that's relevant. I mean, like in the alcohol section, RTDs are massive. And so it made sense there would be an equivalent in the non-alcoholic space, but there just weren't many options available in the UK. I think, when we came over, it was like Gordon's 0% GNT and that was it. So it kind of made us think, gosh, actually we have another opportunity to be one of the first here. And, for a brand that's so rare to be first in a market for any category, let alone, 3 times. And so we just couldn't really pass up the opportunity to do that. And so over the last kind of year or so, we've been setting up manufacturing here in the UK and getting things ready. And I think for us as well, probably our branding, our communications is probably more similar to the UK, our sense of humor than it is in the US. And so, we launched at the end of November into Morrison's nationwide, and it's been really well received so far. So really positive early signs.
Okay, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about, let's start off with the name. So how did you come with that?
We actually had a different name to start as a holding place. And then on these calls, we kept talking about alcohol free. And one of the guys in the team, he's like, he just shortened it to AF. And he goes, oh, you guys also know what AF means, right? And we're like, oh, okay. And it stands for the category. And so we're like, that's pretty cool. And we know we could have a lot of fun with it. So officially, AF stands for alcohol free.
Okay. Nothing else.
Nothing else. And it's funny because people do come up to us and they're like, oh, you do know what AF stands for? And we're like, no idea.
You tell us.
Alcohol free, of course. So so that's kind of how the name came about. And again, I think it just speaks to our personality. We're a little bit rebellious. We like to do things differently. It's energetic rather than a wellness drink or something serious.
And then the branding. So again, lighthearted, funky. Is that when you were sitting down thinking, what is it going to look like? Where did you start?
We took a lot of inspiration from perfumes. We wanted it to look really elegant and something you would be proud of, holding, and get interest, and people would like, oh, what's that? And then the marbling, we actually make these marbles ourselves. So we work with a printer, and we do the oil on the water, and we do lots of different marble versions. And so they're totally unique. And the colors, you know, it's a bit of like mixology, kind of represents the ingredients. I think, you know, we wanted something really beautiful that you would like want to look at. But then at the same time, there's this kind of almost paradox of this like, oh, but there's a big AF in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that kind of surprise that we wanted to give people, and just, you know, a little bit of a smile when they look at our cans, but also feeling like, yeah, this is something I'd love to serve to other people.
You're in the UK. Tell us a little bit about the flavours that you have here.
Yeah, so we've launched with the April Spritz, which, as I said, is our number one in the States and in New Zealand. And then we've got the spice rum and ginger. So it's like a dark and stormy, but made with spice rum and this really like punchy ginger, which I really love. And then your kind of classic lime margarita. As I said, you know, just the popularity and growth of margaritas globally, we just felt like it was a great skew to have here. And we're going to be bringing out a fourth drink later this year as well.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about serving. Pop them in the fridge and then over ice or from the can? How?
We really encourage people to drink it like they would, you know, a cocktail. And so, yeah, pick out like a beautiful glass with some ice and, you know, garnish it up, because it makes such a huge difference. So like a slice of orange with the April Spritz in a big wine glass, or, you know, a bit of lime, fresh lime with the dark and the spice rum and ginger. And margarita, like, you know, do your salt rim, chili salt if you want, you know, with a fresh squeeze of lime. Because I think that, you know, drinking is about the experience and the ritual as well. Excuse me. So yeah, we definitely encourage people to do that rather than drinking it out of a can.
Okay. And in cans, so was that always the option, or was there other options available?
No, we actually launched in glass bottles first. And gosh, that was, you know, such a pain, because the glass actually was coming from China.
Wow.
And, you know, we were just about to produce, and because of COVID, there was all these shipping delays. And I remember, like, as we were going into our first production, our shipment of bottles were just sitting out in the port. I could see it.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
just there. It's just right there, guys.
Yeah.
It's right there.
But there was such a backup, you know, backlog at the port. And so we were actually we were delayed for like a week or so. But, you know, again, because New Zealand went through quite a lot of shutdowns and things, and our online business became actually quite significant throughout that period. Glass is just like the worst thing to ship. It's heavy, it's breakable. And so eventually we made the transition to cans. And in the US, you know, it's generally like all cans as well. A lot cheaper to make as well.
Okay. So you've got, how many different flavors have you got now?
Probably have like 15. Wow. Yeah.
15 different flavors. So is there any flavor that kind of has surprised you?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's the flavors that people know, like the drinks, like, you know, everyone loves an April Spritz or a margarita. You know, those are like really common, popular ones. And then there are the ones that people look at and don't necessarily buy, but they're intrigued. Like, we have a cucumber gin and tonic.
Okay.
And it tastes literally like a fresh cucumber. And it's so good. And when people try it, it becomes their favorite. And that's probably my favorite as well. We have a whiskey ginger in the US because they like their whiskeys over there. And we were serving it. It was a trade show in Kentucky. And a lot of guys were like, this is not going to be good. But, they'd smell it and they're like, oh my God, like, it's like that smoky aroma. Like when you try this rum and gin, you get that smell of the rum, and this whiskey, it was like the smokiness, and then they'd try it and they were like blown away by just how good it tastes. I just had someone tell me they served this spice rum and ginger to a male friend the other night, and he kept looking at the can going, are you sure there's no alcohol in it? How can it be that there's no alcohol? Because it just really tastes like there is.
So first of all, we need that whiskey one over here. Yeah,
you're a whiskey drinker.
Yeah. As soon as you can, because that does sound very tasty. So I mean, I know that it's early days over here. But in the different regions, is there one flavor that kind of stands out in each territory? And does that kind of surprise you, or?
Well, Aperol Spritz is our number one seller in all three markets, and I think just the explosion of it and the popularity, and like, you walk down a street in New York and in summer and every table, has a glass of Aperol Spritz on it. And I'm sure it's the same over here as well. So that's definitely been incredibly popular. I think, just the explosion of margaritas and tequila as well. So things like Paloma, that's really popular. We launched mango margarita in the US, and then we followed that into New Zealand. And that's now being served on Air New Zealand flights internationally. So I think the margarita is like it's the drink these days, and all versions of it. But it's generally pretty consistent.
And in terms of differences in each territory, in terms of talking to people, give us an insight into how you have to talk to different territories.
Yeah, I think, like I say, Kiwis are generally quite understated. And Americans are not. They're like the complete opposite. And so, even talking to buyers, like, and I'm naturally quite a shy person, and so, talking to buyers, like, you have to try and be really confident and really sell yourself. And that's a very unnatural thing, I think, for Kiwis to do. Also, like in our communications with consumers, Americans, like, there's no kind of, underlying sense of humor, or, they don't like necessarily innuendos, or, their humor is more like it's in your face. And you kind of have to tell them, buy this now. Which we would never do. Like, particularly from a marketing and creative point of view, you don't want to hit buy now on, your ads or anything. But I think we've just had to, we've realized we've just got to be more direct with American consumers and tell them exactly what these things are, what to do, where it's sold, like, what it is. Whereas I think in the UK and New Zealand, you can have a bit more fun with that and be a bit, cheekier and like more implied sense of humor.
No, I did, having a look through your stuff, that it is, quite dry, and I kind of like it, and it goes down very well here, where I thought, being that dry in the States maybe might not, they might not get it, might not work.
And so that's definitely been a challenge in the US, and also just the size of the US, right? I mean, like, you're talking we're in 41 states, and they're so different to, like in New York versus LA versus, Texas. Like, again, different flavor profiles. Aperol Spritz is a very popular drink in New York, not necessarily so much in Middle America. And so just even finding, like, how we communicate within the US has been really challenging. And the size of it, like, your marketing dollar does not go very far in the US.
So obviously it's been a great success, but has there, ever been any challenges, anything that you look back and say, oh, I wish I'd done that a little bit, different at the time?
Look, this is my second business.
Yeah.
And, what I learned from my first one is nothing is going to go as you planned. And there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be setbacks. And so I kind of prepared myself for that. And I think when you do accept that things are going to go wrong, it's actually easier to deal with it rather than kind of be hit with it and go, oh my God, what do I do? And knowing that you're going to get through it. Like, being a business owner, it's like this huge emotional roller coaster all the time. So there's absolutely so many things. We have this incredible ingredient, Afterglow, in our drinks. And when we started, it was just a tiny little thing under here. It just said with Afterglow. And in New Zealand, people don't question things like ingredients and stuff because our food system, everyone kind of trusts it and it's very safe. In the US, my God, every day we get tons of emails go, what is this Afterglow? Like, what does it do? Is it going to show up in a drug test? And we had never kind of anticipated that. But it is also our biggest differentiator. And so, this label has probably changed like 6 times, just in terms of hierarchy and the look and feel of it all. So there's just so many lessons you learn on the way. And I think that's just part of, running a brand in your own business is like, nothing's ever going to be perfect from day one, and you kind of have to adapt and change all the time.
Okay. And success stories, like, is there, a little tale anecdote that you want to say of something that went really, really well?
It was really interesting. We had launched in April 23 in the US. And, the biggest retailer in the US is Walmart. And we were told by everyone, they were like, don't even think about it. Walmart's like the slow follower. They don't get into new things until like it's been around for 2 years. And, and then they know there is a mass, appeal for that category. But 6 months in, we got a call to go and see Walmart. And so I was in New Zealand at the time and had to fly to Arkansas, which at the time I was like, where is that? And how do I get there from New Zealand? So flew there, and it was a 15-minute pitch to 3 Walmart buyers. It was a bit like Dragon's Den. And so you just had 15 minutes to sell it, and then they decided on the spot whether they're going to range you or not. And they all said yes and gave me a little golden ticket.
Oh, wow.
And 6 months later, we're in 1,000 Walmart stores.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. I think, for us, obviously the product speaks for itself. And often I think Americans, that because they're so good at selling and they're so confident, like they must all know what they're doing. And it's just been nice going over there and go, actually, no, even though we're quieter and less loud about our achievements and things, like we actually, have a fantastic product. We know how to sell the story, and every meeting I've had with retailers over there has been, a real success. And I think leveraging your strengths of being different, being a bit more humble, the fact that you come from New Zealand, a lot of people see that as a disadvantage, but we kind of try to play that up as a strength.
Okay. And what's next? What can you tell us? What are you up to?
Oh, wow. I think the team are all like, we need a rest. Look, we've still got a huge job to do in the US. It's become incredibly competitive. Last year, I think one of the buyers told me he got presented with 600 new items in this category.
Wow.
So it's growing super fast. And so, you know, we've got to try and stay ahead of all of that. Obviously, the UK, now that we've launched, you know, and just we're talking to a few other retailers, and we've got a big summer program coming as well. So that's really exciting. So lots to kind of just build up the foundations here of the UK. We're a very small team, like there's 11 of us, and half of us are in New Zealand. So it's very much a global business, but for us it's kind of like, you know, we want to do stuff and we want to do it really well. So yeah, just really kind of doubling down and focusing.
Okay, and you're a veteran in this area. So is there anything you'd like to say on the category in general? Anything that you'd like to see happen in the category? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very different by market. And I think, you know, for the UK specifically, there's such a huge opportunity for ready to drink. Like, we know convenience is key in beverage. And, you know, we're seeing that in alcohol sales as well. So I think there's just such a bigger opportunity that the retailers here are probably only starting to pick up on. In the US, you know, in this set, probably about 22% or 20% of the shelf is for RTDs. And so there's still, you know, a big gap from the UK market. So yeah, I think, you know, having more choices in this category, good choices.
Yeah.
Because there's unfortunately still a lot of terrible tasting drinks out there as well, will really just help grow the category.